Not all development sites are created equal. Two blocks of land can look almost identical, yet one might be incredibly valuable to a developer while the other one is almost useless. And the difference often comes down to a few factors most people completely overlook. Welcome back to Inside Property Development. Today I'm joined by Gav from our site acquisition team, who spends every day assessing sites and identifying the ones with real development potential. In this episode, we're going to unpack what actually makes a site valuable, how much location really matters compared to zoning and land size, and the hidden factors that can dramatically change a site's potential. Let's get into it. Hey Gav, what characteristics do you think make sites attractive to developers?
Well, developers like making profit. So we try and find things at the very first stages that aren't going to cost us any extra money. So a site that's dead flat is always a bonus. We're looking at shadowing. So yeah, fall on the side, I guess. Is the second crossover, if you're going to be doing a dual lock, is that going to go in no problems at all? Are there any utilities in the footpath that we need to navigate? But if you're looking at adding value to a site, then finding a site with a nice wide frontage, that provides some flexibility with the design.
Yeah, cool, Gav. I love it. So we're looking at things, I love the way you said early on, don't cost us extra money. Developing's expensive, we know this, but through the site selection process, you can make a site cheaper by finding sites that haven't got these little curveballs.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, it's really easy to say no to sites, and I do that 90% of the time. The tricky bit is just trying to work out the difference between a site which looks pretty good, one that is actually going to make you some money. And there are quite a few that you look at, you can drive past down the street and think, yeah, look, there's money there. But quite often once you start digging in, it becomes a lot more difficult to find profit. Yeah,
love it, Guru. Love those. Any more that you want to add?
I guess the second layer would be things like shadowing in the backyard. So do you have a double-story dwelling on the west side which is going to block the afternoon sun? This is very site specific. So then it's also trees as well. So, are there trees that we're going to have to navigate as well? They're going to cost money or impede the design.
Yeah, I think that's a great one because even though trees might be able to stay and people get the approval, hey, it can stay, but what's it doing to the design? And you get to the end of the project and you're walking through the property and you think, wow, it'd be great if the tree wasn't here and we could be bigger and larger and all those sorts of things. And that costs you genuine money.
That's right. And the new res code does make things easier, particularly in areas such as Bayside, where previously a standard width block for a dual lock is really not ideal because the level one setbacks were so restrictive, if you like. So if you add a tree into that as well, that has a big TPZ, and then you've got to reduce the size of your footprint as well, or you go to a different sort of different design with your stumping and so forth, then the costs get increased, and also your I guess the livable space upstairs is not as attractive to a buyer.
Yeah, so you're copying it from both ends essentially. Your build cost has gone up and your resales and attractiveness of your product at the end has gone down. So that's probably a real double-edged sword that can get nasty really quick. Costs are going up and resales are coming down.
And that's important because you could be looking at a site, you think, this is great, love it. The tree's there, that's okay. But when you add all these things together and you're thinking about your design, you're thinking about what's going to be on offer on auction day, how you're going to sell these, what the market's going to respond to. All these little things add up and can impact your resale values.
All right, Gav, great points. Now, how much does location really matter versus zoning and land size?
Okay, well, this is interesting because the zoning, as we know, is different in different areas within a suburb. I mean, originally we were just talking about site specific and now we're talking about location. And it's easy always to fall back on, look, near transport, near schools, all those sorts of things. And let me tell you, they are priorities. But there's also things like, if you've got general residential areas, then you've got your neighbourhood residential areas. And then usually with the neighbourhood zoning, you can also then get some restrictive design development overlays as well. So depending on what your strategy is, you need to be very, very careful with the zoning, and also more particularly now, even with the new res code, is the overlays on the site that may restrict your design.
Yeah, I like that because a lot of people, I feel like, people that like property and they're interested in property development, they can find good areas. So it's like, hey, that's a good area, and they're areas you like, for whatever reason, how keen your eye is does vary, but people understand where good real estate is to a degree. But it's coming a layer down if you want to be a property developer and figuring out where those zones are that are encouraging to the type of development that you are chasing, because a good area isn't the only box. When you're playing this game of activating property, it's super important that your zones coincide with a good location and you can put a bow in it.
That's right. Well, you've got your zoning and then you've got your design strategy, but then you've also got to consider the land size, which is another part of this question, right? So if you've got a general residential zone and you just want to do a couple of townhouses, you don't want to spend too much money on the development, and it's 50 to 100 metres from a train station, you're going to be paying more for the land because a real estate agent or a vendor, whoever owns that property, they've done the work, right? I mean, a real estate agent will do his numbers on it as well. And they know that if it's a general residential zone and it's 100 metres from a train station and it's 750, 800 metres squared, then they're going to be selling it to a developer who's going to do 4, maybe 5 dwellings. So therefore, the cost of the site itself is going to be higher.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's something you need to understand, because if you're looking to do a 2 townhouse strategy, you're too close to that activity centre. You need to push out a little bit. You'll pay less for the land because it is only a 2 site versus something that is much more dense where people can pay more for the land.
That's right. And then you might be, with your strategy as well, you may want to do something that's really nice, like a higher end finish in a townhouse scenario. Then being close to a train station or more traffic is not going to be appealing to the buyer either. So you might be looking in a residential zoned area, a couple of streets back from an activity centre, but still maybe within walking distance. But you got more of a leafy street. The council might have a couple of design development overlays on it. So therefore, you may be restricted. You can't do multi-unit development, but you can actually put a really nice dual lock, medium to high quality, and the people who want that product want to live in that area because that's sort of what's surrounding that property as well. So it's appealing to them as well.
Yeah, I like it. So knowing your market, knowing who you're designing for, who you're developing for, and peeling it back, and by the sounds of it, sort of that second option, putting 2 nice dwellings on it, chasing owner-occupiers, chasing families potentially, you're delivering bigger and better dwellings, chasing higher resales versus being close to that activity centre and doing 6 dwellings where buy price is lower, first home buyers, cheaper budgets, don't need to be as nice, but appreciating who your buyer is.
That's right, and that's the flip side. If you have the budget and the intention to do a 6 or 7 townhouse stack, for example, you don't want to be delving too deep into the suburb because the council don't want it, the locals don't want it, and the potential buyers, they don't want to have to walk for 45 minutes or 30 minutes to get to a train. So your market and also the locals, they're not going to be very happy with that strategy.
Yeah, love it, Gav. Understand your buyer. And if you want to go deeper, jump inside the Little Fish Network, our free development community. Links below, everyone helping everyone in there. All right, Gav, definitely some gold in there. Last one. What hidden factors can dramatically change a site's value?
Well, there's positives and negatives. Let's start with the negatives. Usually those things are hidden in the contract.
Yeah.
So you've got to do your due diligence there, read a few, get to understand how the language they use, but also you've got to lean on your consultants as well. A couple there to look out for would be single dwelling covenants. Not everyone picks those up. And also in some areas there's a brick covenant. And those can add anywhere between 30 to 100 grand to the price of the build, depending on the percentage of brick required in the design.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So as you're going through the contract, and like Gav said, lean on your professionals and your consultants. That's why you pay them. But for somebody that's looking at a lot of sites, it is good that you get half good at doing this sort of stuff. But going through the contract and seeing that old scanned piece of paper that's slipped in there, that looks like it was written hundreds of years ago, reading that and understanding what's in that, because usually there can be a sting in the tail. Like you said, it could be a single dwelling covenant, it could be the materials you need to use. All these things make it harder.
It's beautifully written, but you can't understand it. So you've got to be careful. You've really got to take your time and pay attention.
Yeah, no, I love it, Gav. That's a good one. Now, I guess they're hidden things that'll bring the price down or bring the value of the site down. What's some hidden ones that we can look for that will increase the site's value?
Well, you can look as well at council websites in the area that you're looking at doing a development, and just seeing what they've got coming up from a development perspective, whether it's residential, whether it's parks, whether it's updating a train station. Examples there might be in Hyatt, the old CSIRO site. They're completely redeveloping that. It's a huge lot of land. They're doing, it's quite a high density residential, but then they're doing a whole lot of parkland, so really beautiful parkland. So, if you were developing there the day that they start digging there, it might not be ideal because you're going to have a bit of competition, but depending on what your strategy is, an area that doesn't actually have a lot of parklands will all of a sudden have retail and 3 or 4 big ovals and areas you can use. They're really handy, but then you could also look at other strategies such as with the Melbourne Metro rail link, they've itemised or identified town centres that they're going to invest a lot of money, not just into the train station, but they expect that these town centres will become a lot busier. The zoning's changed in these areas. So, for example, Sunshine or Clayton. So if you're buying in those areas, you know that in 10 years' time, the amount of money that's going to be invested into those activity centres is going to be very high. So there's going to be a large demand for property in those areas.
Yeah, see, I love that because we've got plenty of clients that buy and hold and build out their portfolios and that sort of thing. And as these areas gentrify and everyone knows it themselves, they go through an area and the train station's been updated and everything around that area's been updated, and you go, wow, this is really smart. So you want to be involved and hold properties in those areas where those things are going on, because that's a look and feel increase to a suburb that's really nice to be around.
Look, another example there is the McKinnon School Zone, which we like. They opened a new campus 3 years ago and extended the actual school zone quite a bit. And if you were doing your homework at the time, we had a client who did townhouses just outside the zone. It changed when he went to sell, and they were probably worth 150 grand more than what they were the year before.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. So so they're the hidden negatives and the hidden positives that you need to be aware of when you're playing this game.
Got to do the work.
Gav, amazing, great insights as always. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Back to work.
Let's do it. All right, if you're serious about property development and you want to go deeper, here's how we can help. First, join our Little Fish Network. It's a free community where developers share real projects, strategies, insights every day. The link's below. And if you need a site, we can source and secure the right development opportunity for you through our buyer's agent service. If you want access to me, I offer one-on-one mentoring, so you've got me in your corner when you need it. And if you want a done-for-you service, our expert team handles end-to-end project management. And if you're ready to move, book a call with me below and we'll map out the best path forward for you and your project. And if you're still here, I appreciate you sticking around right to the end. Do me a favor, give the video a hype and a like and drop a comment. I read them all and reply to them all. It really helps the channel and helps us keep creating this content for free. I'm Peter Kelly. Till the next one, see you at the top.